When was it like, okay, this is getting serious?
It got serious to me when I booked the job. It was for a G Unit campaign. With my boy TJ, I would get on the songs with him and just be on the chorus, do hooks and stuff. I was like, you know what? 50 Cent, he gonna be able to see us. We can give him our demo. They want to get signed. So we actually did the audition. It was like, man, you kids are phenomenal. And they booked us. Boom. We got there. We backstage with all of them. So we started performing with them. Then it was like, you know what? Y'all is dope. I remember one was like, man, but we don't know how to market no damn kid. We some gangsters.
Take a bitch on the day, fuck her that night. She got a boyfriend, like, bye, nigga, bye.
I'm like, cool, I'm trying to be inside. I'm seeing what we doing.
Goddamn.
My outfit look like.
God playing. You don't know another nigga that's built like this. Watch change color when I lift my wrist. Listen, Motel 6, keep on them lights. Take a bitch on the day, fuck her that night. She got a boyfriend, like, bye, nigga, bye.
I'm like, cool, I'm trying to be inside.
This hell look good.
You have something huge coming up, which is a documentary about P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy.
Yeah.
Did he do it, right?
Yeah.
I know you've been heavy on social media talking about it.
He did it. And I'm the only one who's been vocal about this long before.
Puff was like, yeah, like first he was amping him to get stopped. Then he was like, yo, when we gonna get the chance to, to kick it, like we can just hang out, nigga. We gotta kick it.
This is Puff. Okay.
He telling me we gotta kick it and shit. And he was like, yo, why don't we like go shopping or some shit? I mean, like I pay for it. And I was like,
I'm seeing what we doing.
Goddamn.
My outfit look like.
God playing. You don't know that's built like this. Watch change color when I lift my wrist. Listen, Motel 6, keep on them lights. Take a on the day, fuck her that night. She got a boyfriend, like, bye, nigga.
I'm like, cool, I'm trying to be inside.
So these artists, they're getting ass because that's their ritual. That's the rite of passage to get to the next level.
They rape this. They rape this. Videotape it. Then when he in the meeting, they give him a shitty contract. They play the video of him getting by like 3.
Everybody in the music industry that you see.
A single comment. The criminal trial was never the whole picture. Alongside it, Combs has been dealing with a wave of civil lawsuits that started building years before he was ever charged. It began in November 2023, when Cassie Ventura filed a civil suit accusing him of rape, trafficking, and physical abuse spanning almost a decade. That suit was settled just one day after it was filed. Ventura later testified in court that the settlement came out to $20 million. That single lawsuit opened the floodgates. Within a week, another accuser came forward, alleging Combs had drugged and assaulted her back in 1991 when she was a college student. From there, the filings kept coming. By the time his criminal trial was underway, Combs was facing somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 90 separate civil lawsuits, with accusers ranging from former employees and business partners to celebrities in his own orbit. Some of those names became familiar throughout the coverage. Donity Kane singer Dawn Richard filed suit alleging years of physical and sexual abuse. Describing incidents she says she personally witnessed and endured while working with him. Producer Rodney Jones, known as Lil Rod, filed a lawsuit accusing Combs of sexual assault and unwanted contact while the two worked together in the studio. A judge later dismissed the racketeering portion of that particular case, though the underlying assault and trafficking claims were allowed to move forward. Other suits named associates and even family members, and involved allegations stretching back to the early 1990s, some brought under New York's Adult Survivors Act, a law that temporarily allowed people to file claims regardless of how much time had passed. Not all of these cases have gone the same direction. Court records show a portion of the lawsuits have already been settled, dropped, or dismissed outright. Others have been narrowed down, with certain claims or defendants removed as cases were amended. Dozens more are still sitting with pending motions to dismiss, meaning the fight over whether they even proceed to trial is still being argued out. Legal analysts have pointed out that Combs's mixed verdict in the criminal trial cuts both ways for these remaining plaintiffs. On one hand, his acquittal on the sex trafficking and racketeering charges could make some civil cases harder to press. On the other, if any of them do reach trial, Combs could be compelled to testify, something he did not do in the criminal case, and his assets and business holdings remain very much exposed to potential judgments. So while the criminal case has a clear ending, at least for now, the civil side of this story is nowhere near finished. Dozens of cases are still working their way through the courts, and depending on how they land, They could end up shaping Combs's financial future far more than his prison sentence did. That's the full picture of where things stand. Both the courtroom that already delivered its verdict and the many more still deciding what comes next. If you've been following this story, you already know it doesn't move quietly, so stick around, because there's more to come. For years, the name Sean Combs meant hit records, sold-out arenas, and a business empire built from nothing. In 2025, that same name became the center of one of the most closely watched trials in music industry history. This is what actually happened in the courtroom and where things stand right now. Combs was charged in the Southern District of New York with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and violations of the Mann Act. The case moved through federal court under the name United States versus Combs, and the trial itself stretched from early May into the summer of 2025. 2 women testified for the prosecution, including Combs's former girlfriend Cassie Ventura, describing what were referred to in court as freak-offs, prolonged sexual encounters that prosecutors say Combs arranged and controlled. Prosecutors backed up that testimony with flight records, credit card charges, and hotel invoices connecting Combs to those encounters. CBS News Plus 2. Combs's defense didn't dispute that abuse had occurred in his relationships, but argued that domestic violence, however serious, did not amount to sex trafficking. CBS News. After deliberating for roughly 12 hours, the jury reached its verdict. On July 2, 2025, Combs was found not guilty of racketeering conspiracy and not guilty of sex trafficking, the 2 most serious charges he faced. He was convicted on 2 counts of transportation for purposes of prostitution. As one legal analyst put it on air, it was something of a paradox. He'd been convicted, and yet in avoiding the charges that could have put him away for life, he'd also, in a real sense, won. CBS News. 3 months later, on October 3, 2025, Combs returned to court for sentencing. Prosecutors had pushed for an 11-year sentence to reflect what they called the substantial psychological, emotional, and physical damage he'd inflicted. Combs's own lawyers asked for far less, arguing for something close to time served. The judge landed in between, sentencing Combs to 50 months, just over 4 years, along with a $500,000 fine and 5 years of supervised release. Before the sentence was handed down, Combs addressed the court directly, apologizing for what he called sick actions. CNN Plus 3. Judge Arun Subramanian addressed the victims directly as well, telling Ventura and other survivors, "We heard you." CNN. Combs's defense team pushed back hard afterward, with attorney Brian Steele calling the sentence un-American and arguing the judge had improperly factored in conduct the jury had specifically acquitted Combs of. That disagreement over the sentence became the basis for an appeal, and in a notable procedural win, Combs was granted an expedited appeal, with oral arguments scheduled for April 2026, months faster than the usual timeline. TMZ Forbes. So where does it stand today? Combs's projected release date has actually moved up from April 2028 to February 23, 2028. And there's another thread still playing out, one involving the White House. In January 2026, President Trump confirmed that Combs had personally written him a letter requesting a pardon, though at the time Trump said he wasn't considering it. That hasn't fully closed the door, though. As of early July 2026, sources tell CBS News that Trump has been privately discussing clemency for Combs alongside several other high-profile figures, even as Combs's name has reportedly not made it onto the formal recommendation list from the White House pardons team. Whether that changes is, in the president's own framing, entirely up to him. Complex Plus 2. Combs was acquitted of the most serious charges against him. He was convicted on others. He's currently serving his sentence, appealing it, and, according to multiple reports, still hoping for a pardon that hasn't come and isn't guaranteed to. That's where the facts actually stand, no more, no less. Back in October 2025, right after sentencing, Combs's legal team made a move that isn't typical. They asked the Second Circuit Court of Appeals to fast-track the entire process. Normally, federal appeals take years. Combs's new appellate attorney, Alexandra Shapiro, argued that his sentence was short enough that the usual delays could mean he'd finish serving his time before the court even ruled. The court agreed and granted the request, setting oral arguments for April 9, 2026, a fraction of the usual timeline. The appeal itself rests on a fairly narrow but legally significant argument, something called acquitted conduct sentencing. Here's the issue in plain terms. The jury cleared Combs of racketeering and sex trafficking. But when Judge Subramanian calculated the 50-month sentence, Combs's lawyers argue he still factored in evidence tied to those very charges, the ones the jury said weren't proven. Shapiro's position is that this undermines what a not guilty verdict is even supposed to mean. It's a legal question that's been simmering in federal courts for years, and one the U.S. Supreme Court had previously declined to resolve, which is part of why legal analysts were watching this particular appeal so closely. On April 9th, the case reached the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse in Lower Manhattan, in front of a 3-judge panel. Both sides argued for roughly 2 hours. Prosecutors held their position that the sentence followed established guidelines, and that an acquittal doesn't equal proof of innocence. The defense pushed back hard on the constitutional question. One of the judges on the panel, William Nardini, described it afterward as an exceptionally difficult case, language that told a lot of court watchers this wasn't going to be a quick, routine decision. And it wasn't. No ruling came that day. As of late May 2026, the panel still hadn't issued a decision, and legal analysts expected it could stretch into the summer. There was one more courtroom development worth noting. In April 2026, a New York judge dismissed a separate $100 million defamation lawsuit Combs had filed against NBC Universal, which centered on a documentary he claimed pushed unfounded conspiracy theories about him. The court's reasoning was that any reputational damage predated that particular documentary, given everything else already in the public record, the earlier lawsuits, the media coverage, and the indictment itself. So here's where things actually sit. The criminal appeal is still pending judgment. The civil lawsuits are still working through the courts in parallel. And the part in question out of Washington hasn't gone away either. 3 separate legal tracks, all still open, all still capable of changing how this story ends. We'll keep following this one as the rulings come in. So if you want to know the moment any of these decisions drop, you know what to do. Before any of the criminal charges were even filed, Combs's business empire had already started coming apart. In November 2023, right as the first lawsuits were landing, he stepped down as chairman of Revolt TV, the media network he'd founded back in 2013. By mid-2024, he'd sold off his remaining stake entirely, and the network transitioned to being employee-owned. Around that same time, his fashion label Sean John, once a brand pulling in hundreds of millions a year at its peak, quietly disappeared from Macy's shelves, its longtime retail home. There's been no indication of a relaunch since. Then came Diageo. Combs had built one of the most successful celebrity liquor partnerships in history with Ciroc Vodka and De Leon Tequila, a deal reportedly worth somewhere around $60 to $80 million a year at its peak. In 2023, Diageo terminated that relationship following the initial wave of allegations, and by 2024, Combs had formally settled and relinquished any ownership stake in both brands entirely. He did keep some endorsement arrangements in place, but the ownership, the equity, that was gone. Add to that the institutional fallout. New York City revoked a ceremonial key to the city it had once given him. Howard University rescinded an honorary degree. Peloton pulled his music from its platform. A charter school in Harlem he'd been affiliated with cut ties. So what's the actual number? Forbes had estimated his net worth at roughly $885 million before the allegations became public in late 2023. By the end of 2025, estimates had dropped to somewhere between $400 and $700 million, depending on which analysis you look at. That's a loss, by some estimates, of close to half his fortune in around 5 years. There is a silver lining for him, financially speaking, and it's specific. Because the jury acquitted him on the racketeering charge, legal experts note that the government's ability to pursue full asset forfeiture was significantly limited. Had he been convicted under that statute, prosecutors could have moved to seize virtually everything. Instead, his real estate holdings, including a Bel Air mansion and Miami Beach property, along with his music catalog and remaining royalty streams, are still largely his, at least for now, with the outcome of the ongoing civil suits still hanging over how much of it stays that way. It's a pretty stark picture. The music catalog, the real estate, some royalty income, that's what's left standing. Everything that depended on his personal brand being trusted by corporate partners, that's essentially gone. That's the financial side of the story laid out plainly. If you want to keep tracking how the appeal ruling and the civil cases end up affecting what's left of it, stay subscribed, because this one's still moving.